Here I'll show you 4 tricks for linking data between multiple workbooks in Excel. I'm going to start off really simple by linking individual cells and then ranges, then moving to formulas and functions between workbooks, then show you how to consolidate and combine multiple sets of data between workbooks as well as linking those sets of data. And then at the end, we'll step a little bit into what's called Power Query, which is just a way to import the data in a slightly more powerful way. Before we start, check the video description and click the link to TeachExcel so you can download the files for the tutorial and follow along. And make sure to subscribe and accept notifications so you can see all the new tutorials. First things first, whenever you are linking data between multiple workbooks, you want to have both of them open at the same time. It'll make your life so much easier. Now here I've got 2 workbooks. This is the workbook that has the data that we want to get. I've got it separated onto multiple tabs. And I'm going to show you different ways to get the data. So over here is the workbook where we want to pull the data into. Let's start off very simple. Let's just get one cell of data here. So let's say that we want to get the total sales amount from over here, from this cell right here. All we have to do, go to the workbook where we want the data to appear, type an equal sign just like a regular formula or function. Don't hit anything else on the keyboard. Navigate to the other workbook. Select the desired cell. You'll notice in the formula bar that it fills in with a bunch of stuff up here, and I'll explain that in a moment. But it fills in with the formula bar just like it would if you were selecting a cell on another worksheet in the same workbook. So that's how you know everything is working just fine, when it fills in some stuff up here. Once you've selected the correct cell, simply hit Enter. It'll take you back to the first workbook, and we've got the number 598110. Now, if we double click this or look to the formula bar, you're going to see a really long formula. So let's talk about this. It's very simple, kind of. It's just an addition to our normal cell reference. So let's start at the far right. Here we have our normal cell reference, C14. By default, it'll be absolute references, so with the dollar signs. Then we have the worksheet that it's from, so cells and ranges. Now I've named these worksheets the same between the 2 workbooks so that you can more easily see where the data comes from, but they don't have to be the same. So this cells and ranges right here doesn't apply to this one, it applies to the one in the other workbook. They could be, the worksheet names don't have to be the same, basically. So this is the worksheet name, and over here, the one extra addition within the brackets, the name of the other workbook. So you can see this one is 4 tricks for linking workbooks in Excel -1, and the other one is -2. So it's workbook name, worksheet, cell reference. And that's how it's going to look for the rest of the tutorial, even when I show you different ways to link this stuff. Now this is how to get an individual cell, but what if you wanted to do an entire range? Let's go ahead and delete this, do it again, equal sign. Go to the other workbook, select the cell that you want to pull in. Let's just pull in A1, hit Enter. And now, just like if it was in the same workbook, what we can do is we can drag and move around this cell to pull in data from other cells. However, if I do it right now, it's an absolute reference, so nothing will change. The formula, if we look to the formula bar right now, it's the same for all of them. So what you want to do, go ahead and remove the dollar sign here and the dollar sign here. Hit Enter. Now, it's actually really cool. Copy it down, and we can even copy it across. And you're going to pull in all of the data. Okay, so there's nothing in D. Let's go ahead and delete that. And you have all the data from the other worksheet and the other workbook. It's so easy. And the moment that we change something in the other workbook, let's say we want to change this region from E to N, hit Enter, go to the other workbook. E has been changed to N. Even if we change titles up here, everything will automatically update. All we've done is just a direct link between all of these cells. So you can see this was the original one here, A1. Down here it says A2 at the end, and so on, A3. Now if we go to the right, this is B1 and then it'll say B2, B3, B4, and so on. And we could even, let's find the sales number right down there. So we could go ahead and drag it down like this, or drag it for the entire worksheet, get the sales number, and go ahead and delete these guys. Now this isn't really the best way to get data from another worksheet, but it's one way that you can do it, and it's pretty simple and pretty straightforward and pretty difficult to forget. So now all of these values are simple formulas. However, I do not recommend that you go ahead and edit this like you would a regular cell. Just redo the formula itself with the other workbook open. Now, I showed you this is what the formula looks like, right? Okay. What happens if I close the other workbook? I'm going to show you this now so you don't get freaked out when you see this in person. Let's zoom in. Okay, here it is. Name of the workbook. Now let's go to the other one. Close it. Sure, let's save that. Now, look at this. Looks kind of scary, right? And you may think, oh my gosh, what happened? All that it did, now that the other workbook is closed, it needs a way to reference it correctly. So it has put the file path, the directory listing, how you will get to the other file on your computer. It has put that in front of the file name. So you see it still follows the same format. We have cell reference, worksheet reference, workbook reference, and now it just has the location on your computer, that reference right here. So don't let that freak you out, and definitely don't change this by hand, or it can cause a lot of problems very easily, because Excel kind of tries to interpret all of this on its own. So when you move the files around your computer, it'll oftentimes update for you without a problem. So it's better to rely on Excel sort of figuring that out as opposed to you changing it all by hand. It's very easy to mess up, especially on a large scale. But now, once I go ahead and open the other one, then we go back here, you can see that it has changed how it was before. So it just starts with the name of the workbook instead of the directory path in front of it. So Excel is going to automatically change that for you. Don't let it confuse you. Now let's move to the second thing, which is going to be using formulas and functions across workbooks. As you can imagine, it follows the same pattern that we just did here, so I'm not going to spend as much time covering that. This was pretty much for the foundation of it. Let's go to the Formulas tab, and over here, Formulas tab as well. Now let's say we have some parts, and we want to use a VLOOKUP to enter a part number in the other workbook and get the total, so total stock from here. So very simple. Let's just type part and stock. We enter our VLOOKUP here equals VLOOKUP, lookup value right here, comma, table array. Now remember, have both workbooks open at the same time. So once we're on the table array argument, simply navigate to the other workbook and continue entering the formula like you normally would. We select the table. You can see it filling in up here with the name of the workbook, worksheet, and reference for the cells. Now, don't go back to the other workbook. You've selected your table array. It's good. We have our arguments here. Filling in the formula bar, just hit a comma, and then we can fill in for the column index, which in this case will be 4, and then comma, range lookup, exact match, false. So finish entering your formula here in the other workbook, and then hit enter. It's going to take you back to the first one, and it's going to have the formula filled in right here. So you can see for any reference to the other workbook, just like we showed you on the first worksheet tab, you've got first the workbook name, worksheet, cell reference. So let's type in a part number and see what happens. Stock 117, let's test that out. Stock 117. Let's try out ASC-3, should be 57. Good practice to test out your work. Perfect. So you can see that is super duper easy. And all the other things I just told you earlier in the tutorial also hold true as far as the cell references. So if I close the other workbook, this will have the directory path in front of it. Once you open it again, it'll come back. The references automatically are going to be absolute. So just pay attention. If you want to remove the dollar signs from them, you will have to go ahead and do that by hand afterwards. But otherwise, everything else is exactly the same. It's really, really nice. Now let's get into the fun stuff. Let's move on to the consolidation tab. So here what I want to do is I want to take tables of similar data and I want to combine them. And I want to have them all linked here. So let's say that I've got sales reports for different divisions, different months, and you want to combine it all so you can see it in one sort of master report. So let's say over here, what I've got two worksheet tabs, just so you can see how versatile it'll be. And this is our table of data. We have sales. This could be from, let's say, 3 different stores. So parts and then months, and this is the sales data here from one store. Here's it from another store over here. And the next tab, consolidate to, let's say this is from a 3rd store. Now usually you wouldn't have 2 of them on the same worksheet. I just want to illustrate that you can get data from the same worksheet twice without a problem. So you'll see what I mean in a moment. What we want to do is we want to sum all of this data so we can see it in one worksheet in a separate workbook. First, go to where you want your data, then go to the Data tab, and over here in the Data Tools section, click Consolidate. Now, the first thing is you want to tell this little box what you want to do with the data. So what it's going to do when it consolidates, it's going to do something with all the numbers. Do you want to add the numbers together? Usually that's what you're going to do, but you can also have counts, average, max, mins, products. You can do all sorts of things down here. Now, the next thing that you want to do is to enter the reference. So you want to enter the table reference. Most examples of this use a worksheet table reference that's in the same workbook. So all you do here is you click in here, click the arrow, and then select it from the same workbook or a different worksheet or somewhere in there. Since we want to get it from another workbook, actually it's not that different. Click in here with the reference. Don't click browse. It's going to make your life more difficult. Click in here with a reference. Make sure you have both workbooks open. Click the arrow. Now navigate to the other workbook. You'll see this little guy pop over with you. Select the table. And when you select the right one, you can hit enter or you can click the little button right here. And it will automatically have entered the big, huge reference. Don't do anything up here. Just click add. Now you have your first reference. Now let's go up here again, click the blue button. Let's select the second data table. See, it doesn't matter if it's on the same worksheet, in a different workbook or not, it's all the same. Let's hit enter this time. Click add. Now let's go up here again. And remember still, this whole time we are in the second workbook. We go to consolidate to. Let's click over here, select it, and hit add. Now we have 3 references in the separate workbook, and it's all listed right here. Now, if you accidentally entered one that you don't want, go ahead and click delete, so you can select it and click delete. But once you have all the data tables selected, go down to use labels in. So for using labels in, we want to click top row and left column because we want the columns to contain the same data for January, February, March. We want to get the January data with the January data. And then for the part data, we want each part to combine with the same part in all the other tables. So basically, top row, left column, you're usually going to select both. Now let's not click this one just yet, but obviously that's how you create links to your source data. So now hit OK. Let's go back to the first one. And you can see we have all of our data consolidated nicely and neatly here in the other workbook. So for January ASC-1, we have 3113. Let's go verify that. 1008 plus 1000, 2008 plus 1105. Perfect. Now one thing to note is that all of the data that was just consolidated is just data. There are no links. So it's taken everything over nicely and neatly, but nothing is going to update when it updates in the other workbook. Just static data. So let's go ahead and fix that. We do the same thing that we did before. Go to your empty worksheet, data, consolidate. The lovely thing about this feature is it will save the last thing that you did. So we already have all of our references saved in here. We don't have to go back and do that again. Use labels in, top row, left column. This time, create links to source data. Hit OK. And you'll see it looks quite a bit different. So we have the same data. We can make sure that works. But this time, double click, and we have a sum. But the sum is on this worksheet. So this is pretty interesting. What this has done, let's go to the first row and click the plus sign, is it has imported the data using simple cell references like we used in the very first example, where you have the workbook, worksheet, and the cell reference right here. So it's imported that from each data table, 1, 2, 3, and then it's used a sum to sum that data together. So it's basically just automating what you yourself could do by hand. And then it's used this grouping or outlining feature to hide the data so that you don't see it by default. So it looks like you have a nice, clean, neat little table. But if you want to see where you got the data from, you can click the plus and you can see the name of the workbook and then the formulas themselves right here. So if I click 2, it's going to expand the selections for everything. And you can see this is actually what it imported. Most of the time you don't want to look at all this stuff, so you can go ahead and click 1 to collapse all of it. And you've got your nice, neat little table. Sometimes I will note, if you save your workbooks and then you close them and you reopen them, Excel is going to give you a notification asking if you want to enable links or refresh data. And you should allow that so long as you know that your workbook came from you or from someone you trust, so it's safe. Because sometimes the security settings will turn off data connections. So if you don't see your data updating, it's because the connections have been killed or just prevented due to some sort of security concerns. Now, by this point in the tutorial, you know how to link data between multiple workbooks and multiple worksheets, how to use formulas and functions on them, how to make cell references relative and copy it all around and do all that fun stuff. So what I'm going to show you for the last trick is a more automated way to pull in data from another worksheet. Now for these examples, it's going to be like using a fighter jet to go to the corner store, but I think it's important to just give you an idea, just to show you how you can do it, and then you can go on and learn more about it. So let's go over here to the final worksheet, a simple data set, and we want to pull it into the other workbook. So go to the Data tab, Get Data from File, from Workbook. Then you navigate to the workbook, you find it on your computer, double click, and what it's going to do is it's going to analyze the other workbook. So it's going to come up with this window. It's going to show us all the worksheets in the other workbook. Let's go ahead and get it from worksheets. You'll notice that it shows you all of the data within the worksheet. So if I click these other ones, you'll see all the data listed there. We want worksheets. It works best if your data setup is a simple data table. So if you don't have a bunch of extra titles and all that jazz. So we click worksheets, and now what you can do is you can click load, which is the super simple way to just pull it into your workbook, or the more powerful way where you can do so many cool things that are beyond this tutorial is to hit edit. When you do that, it's going to bring up the query editor, and that's going to allow you to do so many things. You can actually decide which data you want to bring in. You can transform it, you can change it, you can remove columns, remove rows, split the data. You can do pretty much all of the data analysis that you would do in your worksheet after you imported the data. You can do it here. And then you can save it as a query so that each time the data is refreshed, Excel will go and pull that raw data, will run all your functions, your formulas, your data manipulation that you want automatically, and present it in Excel exactly how you want the results to be. So it's an amazing tool. So I highly recommend that you play around with this, and I will show you how to do all sorts of fun things with this in another tutorial. It's way beyond this tutorial. But once you've got the data that you want, how you want it, click close and load. It's the same as clicking the load button on the previous screen, and it will take you to your worksheet. It'll open up a new one by default, and it will pull in the data. Notice that it will pull the data in like a table. So it is a data table setup here. So that means when you click anywhere in here, you're going to have the traditional table tools tab where you can do all sorts of stuff with a table, but you're also going to have the query tab, which is going to allow you to do lots of fun stuff. And if you want to get back to the window where you could edit and change how the data comes into here, simply click edit. If you want to refresh the data, click refresh. And then you may notice that over here we have a queries and connections window. It's going to allow you to do a lot of stuff. So hover over it, go down here, click edit, and it'll take you back to the query editor. Now, if you lose this window, if you click close and you're over here, how the hell do I find my queries? Go to the data tab, and then you can just click queries and connections, and it will pop back up. Now, all of this data is linked to the source data, but since we use this method to access it, we can do so much more with the data than just basic linking of the cells and ranges. So that's why you may want to use the more powerful method of going to the Data tab, Get Data from File from Workbook, instead of just linking cells and ranges and formulas. However, this feature and the ability to import it with the queries and do all that jazz, it wasn't available in earlier versions of Excel. So it's default in Excel 2016 and later, but it's going to be an add-in, I believe, in Excel 2010 to 2013. And in 2007, it might be an add-on, or you have to use one of the other methods to consolidate the data. So this won't always be available unless you have a later version of Excel. And those are the 4 tricks for linking data between multiple workbooks in Excel. I hope you liked the tutorial. If it was helpful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and make sure to subscribe and accept notifications so you can see all the new tutorials.